what if, the very things you're doing right now to prove you're a good person, like your charity work or your self-improvement routines, maybe even those rigid spiritual wellness rituals you follow, what if they are actually the things keeping you profoundly isolated from the rest of the world?
Oh, man. I mean, that is an incredibly uncomfortable question to start with.
Right. It really is.
Because we are just so conditioned to believe that goodness is, well, it's a checklist. We think if we just perform the right sequence of actions, if we display our morality outwardly, we'll inevitably feel connected and at peace internally.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why today's deep dive is going to challenge some of our most deeply held assumptions about how we navigate life.
Absolutely.
We're unpacking this profoundly reflective spiritual text by Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And specifically, we're exploring a Shabad, which is a sacred hymn composed in rag soohee. And our mission today for you, listening, is to decode this text as a timeless roadmap. It's really a guide for moving the mind from a state of total alienation, being a stranger, to the divine, as the text puts it, to a state of profound intimacy and celestial peace.
Yeah, and when it mentions rag soohee, it's actually giving us the literal musical framework for this.
Oh, really? Like the actual mood?
Exactly. The emotional mood this hymn was originally meant to be sung in. In Indian classical music, rag soohee is traditionally associated with this deep, yearning devotion.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it often evokes the imagery of a bride waiting for her beloved, which symbolizes the soul's intense longing for the divine. So it sets this very intimate, reflective tone from the very first note.
That completely changes how you read it.
It does. And before we get into the specifics of this text, I really want you to just step away from the hustle of your day for a moment. Just consider your own life. Like, how often do you measure your goodness by what you display to the outside world, rather than cultivating a genuine, quiet internal connection?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the text begins by painting a super vivid picture of what absolutely does not work when you're trying to forge that connection.
Right. It does not hold back.
Not at all. It explicitly calls out and rejects this massive list of external religious posturing. It mentions cleansing baths, public charity, intellectual spiritual wisdom, tantric spells, and magical mantras.
Yeah.
It basically says all of this is useless.
Which is wild, because that list represents the absolute pinnacle of spiritual performance in that era. I mean, it specifically references the 68 holy places of pilgrimage.
That's 68. That's a very specific number.
Yeah. In traditional thought, that was the ultimate checklist. If you visited these 68 physical sites, you were supposedly guaranteed spiritual purity.
Oh.
And the inclusion of tantric spells and mantras is just fascinating. I mean, in a modern context, you can really think of that as our current obsession with, like, life hacking or manifesting.
Oh, that's such a good comparison.
Right. It's the idea that if you just say the exact right words or perform the perfect morning routine, you can somehow force the universe to give you peace or success.
I mean, reading this, I just kept thinking about trying to use, like, cheat codes in a video game.
Oh, yeah. Perfect analogy.
You punch in a sequence of buttons to get infinite health or to skip a difficult level. But here, you're trying to use those cheat codes in a game where you are handing a receipt of your good deeds to the game's actual developer.
Right. The developer sees everything.
Exactly. The developer can literally read your source code. They can see that your internal data is completely corrupted by ego, even if your character is walking around wearing the glowing armor of a holy pilgrim.
That's exactly it.
So if things like charity are generally considered good in basically every culture, why are they being dismissed as hypocritical rituals here?
Well, the problem isn't the act of charity itself,
No.
It's the illusion of a transaction. The text describes the creator as undeceivable.
Undeceivable. I love that word.
Right. It poses this rhetorical question: how could he ever be deceived by cleansing baths, charity, spiritual wisdom, or ritual bathings? The fundamental flaw is believing you can trick, bribe, or buy favor from the universe with external actions, while your internal state remains completely unchanged.
So it's about the intention.
Exactly. If you're doing these things while your mind is just polluted with attachment and a desire for recognition, like you want people to see how holy you are, it's not spirituality, it's performance art.
Performance art. Man, that hits hard. So if the external checklist is just a performance, how do we actually connect? Because the text offers a counterproposal, right? It says, truth is the ladder to the guru.
Yes, and that metaphor of a ladder is crucial because climbing requires sustained upward effort. Real connection isn't just a transactional souvenir you pick up at a pilgrimage site.
Right. You can't just buy it.
Exactly. And this specific truth isn't just about, refusing to tell lies. It's an internal state of being. The text explains that to climb this ladder, one must strip away what it calls fraud, attachment, and corruption, as well as falsehood, hypocrisy, and duality.
Duality. Can we pause on that? What does duality mean in this context?
Oh, it's huge. Duality here is the illusion that you are separate from the creator and separate from the rest of existence.
Okay, but this brings up a massive human problem. Like, who do we even ask for directions?
What do you mean?
Well, if we're currently wrapped up in that duality, if we're all stumbling around in the dark, relying on our broken cheat codes, how do we even find the bottom rung of this ladder of truth?
Yeah, the text warns about the exact people we usually turn to for directions. It explores this problem of the blind leader, asking, if a blind man is made the leader, how will he know the way?
Oh, wow.
I mean, if someone is impaired by their own worldly entanglements, if their understanding is clouded by the exact same ego and desires that you're struggling with, they cannot possibly help you reach what the text beautifully calls the mansion of the Lord's presence.
That is terrifying when you realize how much of our modern society is built on following influencers, thought leaders, or even modern gurus.
Oh, entirely.
And they're just as entangled in the pursuit of wealth, clicks, or status as anyone else. We are literally the blind following the blind into a ditch.
Yeah, it's a bleak picture if you stop there. But the text doesn't leave us stranded. It introduces a cure for this spiritual blindness, and it's a very visceral metaphor.
Right, the ointment.
Exactly. It talks about applying an ointment to your eyes, which is pleasing to your beloved.
So what is this ointment, practically speaking?
That spiritual salve is explicitly identified in the text as the name of the Lord. It says the ointment of the name is only understood by one who realizes the Lord through the word of the guru's shabad.
Okay, so how do we apply that psychologically?
Well, applying the ointment isn't a physical act. It is a fundamental shift in perception. The name represents the divine essence that just permeates everything. So applying the ointment means training your mind to actually see that divine essence in all things, rather than just seeing a world of objects and people to be manipulated for your own gain.
Okay, but I have to push back here.
Go for it.
Because as I was reading the source material, I hit this massive catch-22. I'm quoting the text directly here. I realize, understand, and know him, only if he himself causes me to know him. And then it goes on to say, he himself causes us to do good and bad deeds. So if the creator himself has to apply this ointment, if he has to cause me to know him, do I have any free will in this? Or am I just like sitting around passively waiting for grace to drop this ointment into my eyes?
That is the big question. And what's fascinating here is that the text fully embraces this paradox rather than trying to resolve it cleanly.
Wait, really? It just leaves it as a paradox.
Yeah. It acknowledges the ultimate mysterious sovereignty of the divine. However, that does not equate to human passivity. The active step for the individual, like the highest expression of human free will, is the act of surrender.
See, I'm still struggling with this. How do you actively surrender? Surrender, by definition, feels like giving up. It feels like the opposite of action.
I get that.
My instinct, and I think the instinct of most people listening, is to control the situation. Like, I want to fix the problem.
But that instinct to control is the exact ego the text is talking about. Let's look at the mechanics the text actually provides for this surrender. It says, dedicate this mind to the guru and he will value it highly. It also talks about having to churn this ambrosial nectar and drink it in.
Churning the nectar, like churning butter.
Yes. Think about the physical act of churning milk. The butter is already present inside the milk, right?
Right.
But it's invisible.
Yeah, you just have milk.
Exactly. It requires relentless rhythmic friction to separate the butter from the liquid. Psychologically, churning is the rigorous daily discipline of redirecting your thoughts.
Oh, I see.
You apply your will to focus your mind, to chant the praises, to intentionally pull your attention away from your selfish anxieties and direct it toward universal interconnectedness.
So the effort is the churning.
Yes. You do the exhausting work of churning, but the moment the butter forms the moment of true spiritual realization, that is an act of grace. You provide the effort. The divine provides the transformation.
Wow, that makes the mechanism so much clearer. We do the churning, we redirect the focus, and that acts as the preparation for the ointment of the name.
Exactly.
Now, moving from the internal to the external, once that ointment is applied and our perception shifts, how does our experience of the physical world change? Because the text uses this powerful language about the difference between being a stranger and being a friend.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about shifting from looking at the isolated self to observing how that self relates to the entire universe. The text captures the deep chronic ache of human alienation just perfectly.
Yeah, this was the line that absolutely stopped me in my tracks. It says, if the mind becomes a stranger to God, then all the world becomes a stranger to him.
It's so profound.
I read that and immediately thought of the psychological reality of walking through a densely packed city. You can be on a subway car or a really busy sidewalk, surrounded by literally millions of people, brushing shoulders with humanity, but feel entirely isolated, completely overwhelmed and profoundly lonely.
Yeah, it's that feeling of being totally alone in a crowd.
Exactly. Because you lack an internal anchor, everyone around you is just a stranger. They're potential threats, competitors, or just like background noise.
And in that state of alienation, the text tells us exactly what the world looks like. It says the whole world is overflowing with pain and suffering. Who can know the state of my inner self?
Ugh, who can know the state of my inner self? That is so lonely.
It is. When you are fundamentally disconnected from the divine source within yourself, you're inherently disconnected from the divine spark in everyone else. You only see the friction of competing egos. The text describes this as a world filled with endless, terrifying comings and goings, which refers to the cycle of reincarnation. But it also points to the exhausting, endless treadmill of worldly desires and anxieties. You're left asking this heartbreaking question: unto whom should I tie up and give the bundle of my pains?
Right, because you're carrying this incredibly heavy bundle of anxiety, grief, and ego, and you're desperately looking for a stranger to hand it to.
Yes.
But everyone else on that sidewalk is carrying their own crushing bundle. There is nowhere to put it down.
Now, contrast that agonizing isolation with the mind that has done the churning, applied the ointment, and climbed the ladder of truth.
The friend.
Yes. The text describes a mind that is reconciled with its beloved Lord. The alienated stranger becomes a friend. The text triumphantly declares, I have my own friends, why should I go to the home of a stranger?
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you become imbued with this divine praise, your entire geography changes.
Oh, yeah. The concept of being imbued is vital here. Think of dipping a piece of white cloth into red dye. The cloth doesn't just hold the dye on the surface, right? The dye penetrates every single thread until the cloth and the color are completely inseparable.
It becomes the color.
Exactly. When your mind is imbued with the true name, you stop searching for relief in the homes of strangers. You stop looking for peace in external validation, in climbing the corporate ladder, or in those empty 68 places of pilgrimage we discussed earlier.
Because the true holy places are relocated, the text reveals that the destination is actually inside. It says, in their minds, these friends celebrate in happiness. All good karma, righteousness, and dharma, the 68 holy places of pilgrimage, charity, and worship, are found in the love of the true name.
It's a total paradigm shift. By using terms like karma, the universal law of cause and effect, and dharma, one's inherent cosmic duty or righteousness, the text is pulling all these massive external religious concepts completely inside the human heart.
Wow.
You don't need to travel to a physical temple to fulfill your dharma if your mind is anchored in the love of the true name. The pilgrimage is entirely internal.
So the ultimate destination is what the text calls the guru's mansion. And you find it deep within the home of your own being. You finally realize that the divine is all-pervading, which means you are never actually surrounded by strangers.
Right, you're surrounded by the divine. But this raises an important question regarding how we interact with our physical reality.
Oh, like what?
Well, if the true mansion is internal, how should we view our physical bodies and the material world we spend so much time obsessing over?
Oh, yeah. The text completely flips the script on human vanity here. It has this moment of stark reality where it describes the human body as a fortress fashioned from a mere bubble, a literal bubble.
A mere bubble. It states that the master of the 5 elements fashioned it from a drop of water.
Right.
For context, ancient philosophy categorizes the physical world into 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether or space. So the text is reminding us that our bodies are just a temporary, incredibly fragile configuration of these universal elements.
But we treat it like it's permanent.
We spend our entire lives fortifying our physical state. We build massive modern fortresses, obsessing over anti-aging routines, curating untouchable professional profiles, hoarding wealth, thinking it makes us permanent. But no matter how thick you build the walls, the foundation is a bubble of water. It is guaranteed to pop.
That's a little scary. But It shifts your perspective in such a healthy way. Instead of taking our physical existence so desperately seriously, we're invited to simply marvel at the architecture,
Mm-hmm.
to look at this fleeting bubble and be amazed at the creator who could build something so intricate. There's this incredibly humbling plea in the text. I am lowly and abject. I offer my prayer. Why praise that which is created? Praise instead the one who created it and watches over it.
That is the ultimate piercing antidote to human ego.
It really is.
Whenever we praise the Creator, whether we're praising our own intelligence, idolizing a celebrity, or worshiping a bank account, we are basically bowing down to bubbles.
Bowing down to bubbles. I love that.
We are dedicating our lives to things that will inevitably vanish. When we shift our focus to praising the Creator, we align our minds with the eternal. We recognize that the only true value of the creation is the magnificent light of the one who made it.
Okay, so when a person actually achieves this, when they stop worshiping the bubble, when they surrender their need for control, churn the nectar, and apply the ointment of the naim, what is the ultimate reward described in this Shabad?
The rewards detailed in the text are just profound. First, there is a total cessation of that terror of alienation we talked about. The terrifying comings and goings finally end.
You can put the bundle down.
Exactly. The individual steps off that exhausting wheel of constant worldly wandering and craving. Instead of anxiety, they experience what the text calls celestial peace.
And there's a sensory detail attached to this piece that is absolutely breathtaking.
Yes. The text describes that through the word of the Guru's Shabad, the mortal is united, embellished, and the unstruck melody of the sound current resounds.
The unstruck melody. Anhaj Shabad. Music that plays without any physical instrument being struck.
It's such a beautiful concept. When you strike a guitar string, it makes a sound, but eventually the vibration stops and the sound dies.
Right.
The unstruck melody is the eternal, underlying vibration of existence itself. It represents a state of ultimate flow. When the chaotic, fearful noise of your ego finally goes quiet, you don't hear nothingness. You hear the resonance of the universe. You harmonize with it.
You aren't just looking at the map anymore. You are a vital, resonant part of the landscape.
Beautifully put. It is the pinnacle of the transformation from a stranger to a friend. You become so deeply blended with the divine that the very frequency of your mind vibrates in perfect time with the Creator.
So what does this all mean? If we look back at the journey we've taken through Guru Nanak Dev Ji's teachings today, the roadmap is incredibly coherent, even if it requires abandoning the easy, transactional path our egos really prefer.
Yeah, the ego does not like this path.
Not at all. We are being guided away from the deception of performative rituals and the blindness of following worldly entanglements. We are urged to use authentic internal truth as our ladder. By doing the difficult daily work of churning the nectar, by actively surrendering our illusion of control and applying the ointment of the name to our perception, we completely alter our reality. We transform from isolated, exhausted strangers carrying heavy bundles of pain into beautifully imbued friends of the divine, resting peacefully in the internal mansion, listening to an eternal, unstruck melody.
It is a phenomenal shift from external seeking to internal realizing. And as we conclude, I really want to leave you with a thought to mull over as you go back to your day.
Let's hear it.
While this text speaks of ancient practices, things like tantric spells and cleansing baths at 68 holy places, the human impulse remains exactly the same today.
Yeah, that's so true.
What are the modern rituals or performative metrics of success that you rely on to feel worthy? Is it your productivity output, the aesthetic of your social media, the constant approval of your peers? If you were to strip all of those external actions and validations away right now, what would you be left with? What kind of melody or what kind of terrifying silence would you find echoing in the mansion of your own being?
We spend our whole lives desperately trying to manipulate the world around us, looking for a sign that we've finally arrived, completely ignoring the fact that the destination is already inside us. You just have to be willing to stop performing, apply the ointment, and finally open your eyes.